there's going to be UAE investing billions and billions. Oh, we won. It's because of me and so on. I'll give you an example. The trade war, the agreement, the first actually that went, the agreement that was signed between, was the UK and Trump and the US. Roughly it's for one that wins, it's the other one that loses. But roughly the US will win 12 billion. And out of the 12 billions, there was 10 billion US dollar was acquisition of Boeings. Well, just tell me one thing. Do you think this acquisition is linked to the pressure of Trump? No. The acquisitions, those are long-term plan. If you really analyze the one that bought, I think it's British Airways, but those are actually, they were in the pipeline, the same as he went to the Middle East. And he came with those big contracts. You see, I'm going to make them invest and so on. Well, first of all, most of it is, it's completely inflated. Because he's done this in 2016. He did that. How many times he did? Oh, I signed so many deals. Well, those were all in the pipelines. They are long-term investment, and especially when it comes to Boeing. So whenever you want to actually get some aura or some wins, well, you just press Boeing to say, well, can you accelerate this contract that you managed to put in place? But those are 10, 20 years investment contract, that are planned already. So it's nothing new. So in reality, there's zero win. Really, when you look at what really happened, even for the immigration, illegal immigration and so on, this is all fake news. It's all cosmetics. Ultimately, I'm asking, I'm fine. If he does something right, I will be the first one to say, well, that is right. But superficially, it sounds good. When you say Maha, make America healthy again, and you say, oh, I'm going after after the lobby, pharmaceutical lobby. Well, it's good, but I'm looking at actions really. Since it started, nothing. I mean, so far, name me one action that made a change. They were all words. Pointing at Israel, what do? You still arm them. You're pointing at, you criticize. You did this clown show in the White House with Zelensky. But ultimately, he said, I'm going to stop sending weapons. Well, those are long-term plans. It's been done. If you stop it, you might stop it like maybe for a few days, but it's all there, not actually, there was no disruption. You see but people, they jump on that and they say, well, Trump is going to bring a difference. It's always like this. People don't dig. They say, they listen to what he says and they say, oh, well, that's a big win. And they don't dig. And they don't focus on actions really. Ultimately, it's about confusing people. Sometimes, did you see actually the interview he had when he came to China? In reality, China did a backtrack. China states pull. And actually, the humiliation was for Trump. And I'm not pleased to say that, but there was a reality. He still managed to have a poker face and still lie to the camera and say, oh, I didn't want to destroy China. Well, believe me, if he could destroy Chinese economy overnight, he would. But it was more painful for the US economy than for the Chinese economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have to kind of wait and see where that goes, because the US is never going to accept this. They say constantly, the politicians in Washington say this, the corporate funded think tanks constantly talk about this in their papers. They cannot accept China surpassing the US. It's unacceptable, and they're willing to do almost anything to prevent it from happening. So this didn't work. What are they going to do next? I don't think they're even going to skip a beat. I just wanted to show this because, Angelo, you were talking about pharmaceutical. This is to your point, Angelo. President Trump says what people want to hear. If you just stop and think about it for just 5 seconds, just think about what he's saying for 5 seconds. Trump's order on U.S. drug prices. What's in it? How will it work? This is the BBC. Of course, they're being critical, but we could have looked at President Trump's own post on this on his social media platform, Truth. He's talking about making America most favored nation status. These are U.S. corporations. They are based in the U.S. And the reason they have to sell their drugs cheaper to say here in Thailand because the government here nationalized pharmaceutical production. And they told these corporations in the US, if you do not drop the price, and you can't be trusted to do it, so what we're going to do is we're going to manufacture the drugs ourselves. And you can sell your drugs here. If people want to pay 10 times more than what it costs to make them, they can, but we're going to make sure that medication that people need to stay alive, they can get it as cheap as possible. We will provide it for, we will manufacture and we will distribute it ourselves. We don't care about your patents. And if you want to sell medication in Thailand, you need to drop the price or you're not going to make any business here. We are not putting people's lives under your desire to constantly expand your profits. That's how Thailand did it. That's how India did it. That's how a lot of countries have done it. Why can't this happen in the US or in Canada or the UK, which actually have universal health care? Why can't they do that there? Because they won't stand up to the pharmaceutical corporations, because the pharmaceutical corporations are part of the deep state that controls the collective West. They will not allow it. It will never happen. So President Trump is just posturing here. He's just pretending he's going to fix it. Nothing in what he has said is an actual solution. The solution is nationalize pharmaceutical production. President Trump will never even say that. Nothing will ever be signed to do that. And so they're just telling you what you want to hear, and they just want to see how far can we go saying this and then not actually doing it. Rasheed, because I think of pharmaceutical. If I get talking about big pharma, I will not stop. Please go ahead.
You know, it reminds me of how some of the pro-Trumpers, and I want the people to understand that I'm not anti-Trump or pro-Trump. I'm pro-truth, and that's one of the main reasons why I'm on this platform with Brian and Angelo, and also on my own platform, because I'm not going to bow to anybody's whims, especially if it's against the truth. So it reminds me of how you hear a lot of pro-Trump or alternative media when Trump comes to office and said, I'll stop arms supplies. And they'll say, well, yeah, Trump hasn't supplied any arms. The arms that are going to Ukraine, or they were designated under Biden, as if he could not take a pen and write on a piece of paper to with an executive order to stop this. See, this is kabuki theater. This is just for show. He wants you to believe that he's powerless to stop the arms shipment to Ukraine, and yet he's so powerful that he can force corporations from China, that are in China, back to the United States to make the United States great again, when you don't have the industry, you don't have the base, you don't have the trained or the skilled workers, the educated workers, and people are buying this because I think one of the reasons the people are buying it is because America has been at the pinnacle of power and success and innovation for at least a century. And they don't want to see America go down the drain. But reality is telling them that if America doesn't do something drastic, that it is going down the drain because the jobs are closing. You're getting more companies merging together to try to stay afloat. You're getting chain stores that were in business for 80, 90, 100 years closing down. You see all of this. And here is a missing thing, again, that I want to point to everybody. America does not have the luxury of time anymore. To me, this is the most important factor. That's why Trump went out on his little trips to try to build up political capital, and also to show people, hey, America is still a viable country. Look at all of these billions of dollars in deals we're doing, so that they won't look at the situation in debt. And on Bloomberg, they have an article called U.S. loses last top credit rating with downgrade from Moody's. And here is something that is said in here, which goes directly to America's fiscal health and fiscal standing. It says the U.S. was stripped of its last top credit rating by Moody's ratings, reflecting deepening concern that ballooning debt and deficits will damage America's standing as the preeminent destination for global capital and increase the government's borrowing costs. So you don't need any more after that. The United States economy is in real trouble. Trump is suing for time. So he gets before the camera. He's going to tell you what he believes that he wants you to hear. And he'll show you that, look, I'm over in Arabia. I'm signing these deals. I'm taking sanctions off Syria, and I'm going to invest in Syria. How in the heck can you invest in Syria when America is falling apart at home? Does anybody ever ask these questions? And as you say, Brian, that people sit and think that the deep state is something hidden behind a curtain, and they don't realize that the deep state are these companies that lobby Congress, that put their political money in candidates and run these candidates and all of these, and then they put their people in all of these institutions so that they can affect policy regardless to who is in office or whatever. And I think because America no longer has the time, and because the economy is devolving, I would say, at breakneck speed, I think desperation is starting to set in. And I think this is why you see the president, the highest official of the land, to go out to try to build up a little political capital and to show the people, listen, we got these deals coming on, because remember, they have to sell some debt coming up. So they have to show the world, listen, we've made these deals here and we're making other deals. And soon when that bond sale happens, we'll see where America stands right then. But right now, I think it's all political theater. And I think that America is in trouble. And I think Trump and his team knows it. And I think that's why they're trying to designate Israel to take out Iran with U.S. and European weapons and backings. This is why they're trying to divvy up and make Europe face off against Russia and pretend as though they have nothing to do with it, and that they're just bucking up against the U.S. empire. And I think that this is why the United States is now so focused on the Asia Pacific, because they, as you said before, they will never accept China as the preeminent power or an equal power to the U.S. hegemon.
Yeah, and it's not about outcompeting China. It's impossible. The U.S. has no possible way of outcompeting China. It doesn't even make sense. It would be like having the UK outcompete the United States. It doesn't make any sense. They don't have the population, the resources, the industrial base, the education system. And even if they improved all of these things, China already has such a tremendous advantage. It just doesn't even make sense. So what they're trying to sue for time. I absolutely agree with you. I think they're also trying to destroy multipolarism faster than multipolarism can establish itself. I think there's and you're talking about division of labor between the US and Europe, between freezing the conflict in Ukraine, pivoting to Asia, strategic sequencing, exactly as the policy paper said, strategic sequencing, division of labor. This is what it's all about. And like you say, the deep state is out in the open. We can name names. We can see the corporations. We can look at the board of directors. We can look at the policy think tanks that they fund. We can listen to them talk about it on YouTube, sometimes live. You can just tune in and listen. And then when they have congressional testimony, they bring in the think tank experts, and they're sitting there repeating everything that they just came up with to Congress, and everyone in Congress, Republican or Democrat, are all shaking their head in agreement with whatever they're saying. So it's not a secret. People just need to take the time to look at it. I've been accused, because I was on Scott of Calibrated's live stream earlier, my Sunday today, and had people accusing me of having Trump derangement syndrome. Trump's not in charge of anything. I don't like or hate Trump at all. He's a loud distraction. He's not making any decisions, just like Biden. You never heard me obsessing over Biden. You will not see me obsessing over Trump. I'm only trying to point out to people who are putting their faith into President Trump that he's not in charge of anything. He's not doing any of these things that he's saying he's doing. If you want to know what's really going on, look at the policy papers and follow the money to the corporations that fund them. Angelo, what do you think?
Well, it doesn't make me happy too. Same as you. I have, but people are so simple. If you think about it, if you criticize Biden, you are pro-Trump. If you criticize Trump, you are pro-Biden. So whenever you talk about Trump, you have to say, well, you criticize him, and then you say, but I'm not a friend of, I don't like Biden either. Yeah. You know what? Sometimes I find myself to say that, but because people are so simplistic. It's white or black. It's not. They're playing a different game. It's marketing. Basically, one is more globalist, and there's social engineering. We talked about this, leftist, LGBT and so on. And one is more conservative. So basically, you appeal by having this figure, Trump. And I see that a lot, why there's a huge support of Trump in Europe, because people, they've been so upset about this extreme, social engineering, that Trump came in, and it was an appeal to conservative voices. And what he did, Trump, he started criticizing the EU as being, corrupt entity, which it is. But in reality, it doesn't mean it. What he wants to get is popular support. So when Trump is saying, "Oh, I'm against globalists," well, it's not. That's part of his strategy. He needs globalists. He's not. It needs to be, when he says, no, people are, they want to go back to sovereignty. And we all agree, sovereignty is important. Every single nation should be sovereign state and should be self-sufficient. Globalism has killed, many countries around the world. Why the global south is still has been contained was because of globalism. You just make sure that they produce low added value product. You keep them poor. You starve them. There's a debt trap and so on. And when he criticized that, people, they think, oh, by the way, maybe he's my friend, Trump, and he's not, because ultimately he's going to look at his own interest, not even the U.S. You see, what I'm saying is that I'm not even against the U.S. I'm not. I wish so much the U.S. would be so much better, but in reality, we have a common enemy, is the 1%. That's the 1%, and those people. Imagine if you're a billionaire like Elon Musk and all this mafia. Do you care about your passport? You don't. You don't. You can buy 10 passports if you want. They're not attached to the US. You think Elon Musk is attached to the US? Well, yes, because the US is rich because of the US. His contract came from subsidies at the military-industrial complex, and because they put him in a position of monopoly. But otherwise, it'd be doing nothing. Look at the money. Who was behind the money he got? So in reality, what we have, the biggest enemy is the 1%, and that's why you see, when you look, why Putin is an enemy, because Putin at some point, and Russia is not perfect. Neither is China. I'm not even saying that China is perfect, but Putin, what he did once was to have all those oligarchs to sit around, and he said, from now on, I'm not going against the money you accumulated illegally. When there was dismantling of the USSR, all those state-owned assets, they all grabbed that. It was all illegal. It was, disgusting, especially under Yeltsin. He said, I'm not going against that money. You keep that, but I don't want you to see you in politics. And since then, you don't have actually what they call oligarch. When you say oligarch, it's people that are billionaires that actually have their hands in politics. It's not. The real oligarch are in the US. And same as China. Tell me one politician in China who's actually a billionaire or even a millionaire. You don't have that, because they know once they start even trying to touch politics, they are ejected. And that's why Jack Ma, he wanted to touch banking. You don't touch banking if you're not from the state. And he wanted to influence politics. He started buying some media. He wanted to replicate what is done in the West. Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post. And you don't do that in China. You don't. He was stupid. He wanted to start his own bank, can you imagine? And starting to buy media so he could start influencing people. And you don't do that. And that's why they don't like that, because they want to team up with other oligarchs and they don't care if they are Russian or Chinese. But ultimately it's going to be more like WASP, like Anglo-Saxon and so on. They prefer that. I don't think they'd like to have more Chinese than white guys. But I think there's some racists still behind this. But ultimately, what actually unites them is the class, is their class. And what people are completely confused, and what makes me so sad is average Joe in the US is working hard, is extremely poor, is a paycheck to paycheck, is struggling, and he's worshipping billionaires. He's worshipping Trump and Elon Musk. You know, I do understand that you are, you know, when after Biden, you could vote for a goat or a dog or a cat, because anything else could be better. But you know, you cannot worship. You need to you know, gain some more consciousness. You know, you cannot worship billionaires, and billionaires are not going to clean up the government. You know, I mean, you know, corruption, because they are the corruption. Imagine you asking a gangster to run the police. That's what they're asking. Yeah.
And I will be accused of being a communist because I speak ill of Fortune 500 corporate monopolies in the U.S. that are doing demonstrable evil to everyone in the United States. Like, people are suffering in the U.S. because of these corporations, and they'll sit there. And this is the amazing thing about the U.S. political system, how they have trained Americans, at least a part of the population, train them to be adverse to holding corporations accountable. So, like, when I talk about pharmaceutical corporations, you know, nationalizing pharmaceutical production, people will say that's communist, that's socialism. What they already do this in the United States. They socialize all of the risk. They privatize all of the profits. So there is definitely socialism taking place in the United States. It's just a perverted, exploitative, parasitic version of it, where state money bails these corporations out, and when they profit and they succeed, they keep all of that to themselves, and there's no obligation they have to the country that they are operating in and extracting wealth out of. And so what you're doing is you're defending that, when we could have something you know, in the middle ground, where a corporation, if you're going to, people don't know this, pharmaceutical corporations, almost all their R&D is funded either by public money or even charity, and they scoop up things that are being developed when it's almost ready for market, and they just bring it to market, and that's costs that they have to cover. That can all be done by the state. The state could do all of that. They're already doing it all the way up until it gets scooped up by the pharmaceutical corporation. They could nationalize bringing it to market also, because they have done that. They've done it here in Thailand. They've done it in other countries. It could be done in the United States. So people always ask me, Brian, you're always complaining. What can we do? These are the things you can do. And stop putting your support into one of two controlled oppositions. The Republicans and the Democrats are two sides of the same coin. They both serve corporate financier interests. They do what they tell them, and they do it for their interests at the expense of everybody else. Stop paying into that. Stop falling for it. Stop paying your time, your energy, your money, your attention into that, and start investing in something like multipolarism. Start talking about and organizing around these principles, where industry is utilized for the best interests of a country, not a handful of parasites. And why is that so hard to do? And you know, if you're going to say that's socialism, that's communism, just like you were saying, Angelo, SpaceX, they get huge contracts from the government. They get money from the government.
We had this discussion, Brian. We had this discussion. Remember before, you know, when I think the biggest mistake that people do is putting themselves and other people into boxes, and this is when actually you say, oh, what are you? Are you capitalist? Are you socialist? Are you communist? And so on. And first of all, most people, you know, even they define themselves communist or socialist, or you know, or actually they demonize communists, but they don't even have read the Karl Marx. I mean, you know, just the fundamentals. You know, it's just Pavlovian. You know, the dog of Pavlov. You know, it doesn't even think. There's a saliva, but it doesn't even think. So what happens that, and we need to be extremely careful about this. I never define myself about what is your ideology or dogma, because that's extremely dangerous, because then you put yourself into a box and you cannot get out of this. So once you say that I'm a MAGA, then they say those people, this is why those people, they cannot get out of this ideology. Or same as the Democrats, the same. Oh, and that's the divisions. Ultimately, what the game, what they want to do, and that's the game of the 1%, is confuse completely all of us, and you get the 99% divided, and they fight each other, and they watch and they just smile and laugh, because we look stupid. We do look stupid. And this is why, you see, Chinese, when you ask Chinese, they actually don't like to be put into boxes. And remember what Deng Xiaoping said in 1979. He said, it doesn't matter if the cat is white or black, as long as he catches the mouse. Ultimately, that's what Chinese do. They're extremely pragmatic. Why should I be stuck into a box, like I follow Marx? No. What you do is that you see the best practice around the world. The political system was not on their own. They went to see around the world what works, and then they applied to their own realities. The same as economy. They looked around the world and they said, what can we apply? And they were very pragmatic. You see, when they started opening the market, they did on some zones, some areas. They opened like free trade zone areas where you had the Western companies or Japan or Taiwan could invest into those, and they started doing experiments. So they're very pragmatic. Why would you be stuck into that? And then ultimately, you can call it something different. If you were to say that you could have actually a socialist way of speaking to American people, and they would say that's good. Well, what do you say? You would say, well, you know what? The minimum wage should go higher. We should have affordable housing. I mean, but this is socialist, but ultimately you don't put a label, and that's the danger of labels. Don't put yourself into a box, and look for what unites us. That's what Chinese say. I said it over and over. Look for what unites us and set aside the differences, because ultimately it's a class struggle. And I'm not into Marxist ideology and so on. No, but that's the fundamentals of what happened. And when you look at geopolitics or internal politics, that's the same. It's always the same that our enemies, the 1%. The 1% is our enemies. If you are American in the US or in terms of global tensions, it's always the 1%. And what happens is that the 99%, they die in trenches. We die in trenches. And so this is why consciousness is so important. Just think about it. If those people that are dying in trenches now, they knew in Ukraine, they knew that they had to go into the street and just make sure that there would not be Maidan, they would be like, I was so stupid. So this is why people, you can go and go on, and because you are not at the threshold, the pain threshold that you want to do a revolution. You're not going to die. But if you don't gain consciousness, one day you are going to be one of those guys that die in trenches and doesn't know why, how did it get there? Because if Europeans, they are going to fight Russia, well, guess what? You are now into, into consumptions, and you watch porn and Netflix and football, and this is the zombification of a society. But if you don't gain consciousness, you might die one day into trenches. Why? Because you were just too passive.
Good point, Rasheed. What do you think about these people in the West who they are against universal health care? They're against spending money on education and all of these things, but they're perfectly okay with now $1 trillion going to the military-industrial complex, or bailing out Boeing, or the auto industry. They're all okay with that. Why is socialism okay when it's these big corporations? They've been trained, like Angelo says, to become excited when they hear the names of these corporations, but they're adverse to using public money to help everybody else. Why? What is this in the United States? What is this a strategy of tension that they've foisted upon the American public to turn them against their own best interests?
And somewhat, and I think it's a matter of privilege, and it's a matter of being able to hold the economic strings over people. Because if I control your food, I control you. If I control your livelihood, I control you. If I control your finances, I control you. If I give up that control, you become independent. I was thinking, as you were asking me that question, I was thinking about the stuff that you put up on the screen when you were showing Trump making the multi-billion-dollar deals with the terrorist Giuliani and with the terrorists in Arabia. And then I thought about Gerald Celente when he says the merging of corporations and governments is fascism. And then I thought about Giuliani. I thought about Angelo when Angelo was talking about the 13 billionaires plus Trump. That's 14 billionaires in the Trump administration. And then you think about the lobbies that lobby the congressional leaders. They come in with $1 million, as one of you guys said, and go out with $200 million. If this is not the highest state of fascism, of course, when you're masking what you're doing, you don't want anybody to be aware of what you're doing. So what do? You focus on everything else and you make everything else the enemy. You make that way they're not focused on you while you're stealing everything from under them. And I believe the system is set up so much like that it is forced to. That's why it's imploding right now. Because, I hear often in the markets, and this is a sidebar, I hear in the markets when they say a correction is due, or they say the markets must have a correction. People, do you understand? If there is no wrong in it, if it's wrong, there's a correction is needed. If the markets are right, if the financial system is right, there is no need to correct it. All right. So when we're looking at the system of America, there's a great need for correction because there's so much deceit, pillaging, robbing, financial raping going on. So the people that are doing that, they want that to continue in perpetuity. But the problem is that it can't, because you're dumbing down the system and you're dumbing down the educational system, which is the base for any society to progress into the future. So if you dumb down that class, you're actually killing your society in the long run. And these people who are against any help for the poor people, but they have nothing to say about when they issue out all of this money for farming, which we need farms, but these corporations, they go belly up. Remember during the pandemic, the same people who caused the pandemic got trillions of dollars in bailout, but to keep the people from rising up, they gave them a few $1,000s. This is how they mask their robbery. This cannot go on in perpetuity. And I believe that they understand this. So what they're doing now, they're going to try to get as much as they can from as many people as they can before it tanks.
Well said. Very well said. I'm going to go into the questions. There's something else I wanted to say in reaction to what you said, Rasheed, but it's been a long day here. Let's just go into the questions. Maybe it'll come back to me. Let's see here. Let's go. John Helmer says Putin is pro-Israel. Is that true? Is America destroying Israel? Maybe one day Israel will break with the U.S. You have to understand, a country is millions and millions of people. It's not one homogeneous entity that you can categorize and describe with absolute certainty or in absolutes. So Israel is a group of people, is artificially created in the middle of the desert. They just plopped it there. They did it specifically to create a sort of geopolitical forward operating base in the region. It was the British Empire first, the United States second, has used Israel as a proxy, just like they're using Ukraine. Russia, China, all of these countries, they don't have any sort of just natural animosity towards Israel. They have ties, diplomatic ties to Israel. A lot of people in Israel are from Russia. They're Russians that moved to Israel. And so there's a relationship there. And they might not agree with everything that they're doing, just like they don't agree with everything Turkey does or Saudi Arabia does, but they don't want to burn bridges because they know someday in the future, because Israel is not the black capital of this global empire. It is a proxy, just like Ukraine. And they understand that what is being asked of Israel is not in their best interest. And one day there will be the opportunity to win them over, just like all of these other countries that are slowly working their way out from under U.S. hegemony and into multipolarism. So they're going to keep the door open. They don't want to burn bridges. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. If you guys have anything you want to say, just jump in before, as I'm pulling up the next question, just start talking. This is a good one. What do you think of the U.S. military pullout of Yemen? They didn't pull out. They were openly waging a military campaign against Yemen. They're running out of weapons. They could not establish air superiority over Yemen. They were using these MQ-9 drones that were being shot down, and the Ansar Allah were targeting U.S. warships, and at least one occasion, an aircraft carrier taking evasive maneuvers lost an F-18 warplane off its deck because of Ansar Allah anti-shipping operations. So it's becoming costly, wasn't going anywhere. And so what they did was, as they're playing this game of theater, putting distance between themselves and Israel, they just told Israel, you take over. They're still supplying all of the intel to Israel. Israel doesn't have the intel capabilities the U.S. has. They're providing them all of the information, targeting, and everything else, and the weapons, of course. And now it's Israel taking out these ports, other infrastructure that the U.S. would look bad taking out. Israel's their assigned villain. They're the ones doing it. So technically they've pulled out, but not really. They've been there. This has been on and off for years. This all began with a U.S. engineered regime change operation, the Arab Spring. Remember, that was all engineered by the U.S. and it targeted Yemen, among many other nations in the region. And this has been a constant conflict ever since. So just keep all of that in mind. This was just temporary, and it was because the U.S. has limited resources. Remember Secretary Hegseth in Brussels talking about the reality of scarcity. And Rasheed was this is what I wanted to talk about. Rasheed was talking about, you're dumbing down your population. You're not investing in your human resources. You're not taking care of poor people. Poor people are valuable human resources. Look what China is doing by investing in their people, infrastructure, education, healthcare. Look at what it has allowed them to achieve. And now the U.S. realizes we want to wage war against all of these countries. We don't have enough weapons. We cannot build the factories. We cannot find the people to bring in to work in these factories. So everybody, we dumb them down to get control over them and to rob them blind. But now they're not capable of building the advanced weapons. We need to clobber these other people over the head. So it's very complex. Everything is connected. We have to keep an eye on Yemen, because ultimately Yemen is about isolating Iran. And Iran is in a difficult position. I know people don't want to admit this, but Iran is in a difficult position. Their inability to protect Syria, Russia and Iran's inability to protect Syria, really exposes vulnerabilities. We have to keep a very close eye on this, the plan that the U.S. is working on. Rasheed, Angelo, if you got anything you want to say, just jump in.
Absolutely. But when you look at the difficulty the U.S. had with Yemen, well, now imagine if it was with Iran. Iran is another completely other dimension. And then Iran is extremely important partner of China. The first exporting market for Iran when it comes to oil it's China. So you see, this could be actually very damaging for China and the multipolar world. I would say that we need to be extremely careful when it comes to Iran. If there was a retaliation, if there was an attack by Israel and the retaliation by Iran, I'm afraid that there's the possibility of using the nuclear bomb. If there is one place in the world, I'm not too much worried about Pakistan, India, and so on, but I'm afraid that I would say Israel would use it. If it becomes existential, it's a small country. If you have lots of missiles, hypersonic missiles coming from Iran, that's the danger that Israel would. And you see how mad they are. I wouldn't be surprised that they would use it. And I think that's extremely big risk we have there.
Absolutely. We kind of talked about this, removing sanctions on ISIS in Syria. I mean, that's who al-Jawadi is. He is the head of Al-Qaeda, ISIS. It's all the same thing. They make these distinctions for political convenience, but it was just an army of extremists the U.S. deliberately created, starting under the Bush Jr. administration, all throughout the Obama administration, Trump's first administration, all during Biden, and now it continues under the second Trump administration. So this was always the plan. You use these people to do your dirty work, and then you whitewash them once it's all done. This was going to happen no matter who was elected. This is why I tell people elections do not matter. This was all going to unfold. The only thing that would have been different are the lies they told you as they were doing it. So let's keep that in mind. Let's see. No. So this is, do you think the Trump administration is going back to the drawing board regarding Ukraine since Moody's downgrading of the US dollar? No, there is one plan. The plan is to wage this proxy war against Russia, to overextend Russia while also trying to deal with Iran and China. This was always the plan. This is what the US has been working on for decades and decades. Again, no matter who's in the White House, who runs Congress. And that is what they're going to continue to do. As Rasheed constantly points out, the US is running out of time. The US, do you remember General Wesley Clark talking about 7 nations in 5 years or something like that? They are way, way behind schedule. They're so far behind schedule. And the longer this takes, the more the rest of the world develops. This is also a story about the proliferation of technology and information. There's always this idea in the minds of Western people that they are inherently genetically superior to the rest of the world. They are not. And China's rise and its ability to surpass the collective West is a very explicit demonstration of this. And so, no, they're going to continue doing this. They're going to adapt as things unfold. What we have to worry about is the danger of them becoming increasingly desperate. We have to keep a close eye on that. We're just talking about India and Pakistan, or maybe we didn't, but this, again, you have to understand, India and Pakistan are huge countries. Both of them are huge countries. Together, they made up the Indian subcontinent. This was colonized by the British. They divided all of these people. They created generations of animosity between different groups of people. The languages that they speak in Pakistan and India and in Kashmir are mutually intelligible. So like they can talk to each other. It's just kind of like Ukraine and Russia. And they've created these artificial divides, and they've got these people pitted against each other. There are people in Pakistan and India that understand this, and they're trying to pivot their country into the future with multipolarism. And there are other groups of people in the military, in politics, in the information space that are servants of Western hegemony. It's hard to explain until you meet someone that has been brainwashed by Western propaganda. They feel inferior to the West. They look up to the West, and they have this deep, deep, desperate desire to be accepted by the West. Angela, I'm sure you've met a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point. We need to go back to history and to see what the partition of those countries. We saw that in the Middle East, and then you had the British Empire carving up India. So basically, it started with Pakistan and India, and then Bangladesh actually did their own country. But ultimately, when you look at how they did that, was not natural. You see, this concept of nation state is actually a very new concept, and it was the way they carved up those countries was just to create, future wars. Basically, they could have grouped all the Shia together. No, they had to mix up. They could actually give access. They denied access. There was Kuwait was part of Iraq. Naturally, Kuwait should have been part of Iraq and having this access to the sea. So they did it on purpose. And in addition to that, keep in mind that Israel, the purpose of Israel was always not for the Jewish people, to protect the Jewish people. That's the Hollywood narrative. The unique purpose of Israel was to be a huge army base for the US interest and to divide all the Middle East, actually all the Arab nations. In reality, was to divide the Levant and the Maghreb, so African Arabs and the rest of the Arabs, to divide them because it was a united, I would say, they could make a united nation because they share the same language, same religion, but the problem is that they had lots of natural resources, and that's the purpose of Israel. So when you look at Israel is only fulfilling its role, and they are the same as they're using Ukraine to fight Russia, or they're using Israel to fight US wars. And it's not the other way around. People are just too much obsessed about Israel controlling the West and so on. You might have, disproportionate percentage of Jews that are in high position, but it's not Israel that is controlling the West. It's not. Ultimately, I think it's a good thing. It's useful